The Friday Power Lunch is recorded before a live Zoom audience. Follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and show us some love and become a sponsor through Patreon. The Friday Power Lunch. Badass women getting things done.
All right, May Day, May Day, May Day, but it's May 2nd, and we're so glad you're here because, you know, meeting together every week is fabulous. We love to dance in. We hope you're ready to have your dancing shoes on. We're going to do some Green Day today. Love Green Day. We're playing a song from the Revolution Radio album.
We live in troubled times.
They like kind of rock out and have a dance partner with Carrie there for a minute, but I'm going to say, what good is love and peace on earth when it's exclusive?
Right.
A new
Injustice.
day's dawning. That's right. Today we talk about injustice, but so great to have. I'm Catherine White. We have Carrie Short here, Coastal Carrie coming in, and our show messenger, Fennell Norton. So let's get our power chat kicked off. I want to say one thing just on the side note. I saved me a little sign from last year. Anybody coming in from out of state, Virginia's voting kicks off today, May 2nd. So look at us. But we're also saying we're not really pushing the early vote yet because it's just a primary right now. And a lot of people don't know who the hell's on the ballot, right? So
That's right. So let's
Yeah,
keep
but-
crowded
but-
field up there for the
Yeah.
lieutenant governor is a crowded field. It's hard to keep up.
I know. So Virginia has elections. They kick off today for a primary. Look at my funny little sign I found. I want to make sure people that are activists in the room, we're going to be gearing up for that. So yeah. So what are you thinking? A new day dawning, Fennell. What's on your mind today about the new day?
Well, a couple of things, but first I'll say is that remember those primary voters are our really, really good voters. And so we can look after them to maybe volunteer and do some other activities because they are some of our strongest voters. So that's really cool. But I want to go back to the video, the song that we opened up with, because I think it was really powerful. I think you said one of the messages in the song, but I also think what good is a message if nobody hears it? And I
Yeah.
think that's where our opportunity is to start speaking so that people actually hear us and going to the spaces where people are so that they can understand what's happening. And I think the best evidence we have right now is the first 100 days of this horrible, horrible regime. So
If that doesn't motivate you to get to the polls, I was telling Catherine, you know, we've been doing meetings and I think I've shared with y'all how disappointed I was. We had a meeting, meet your delegates, trying to push people to understand what their districts were and meet the delegates. Man comes up to me later, older gentleman's been doing protests. He loves to tell me he was protesting the Vietnam War. Fantastic. Great for you. Telling me, well, you didn't really give us anything to do. And I don't really see what this has to do with beating Trump. And at first I felt terrible because I thought I have failed as a leader to somehow help this man understand the relationship between a House of Delegates race and our gubernatorial and also most
Yeah.
importantly at times the AG race has to do with beating Trump. Friend, it has everything to do with beating Trump. For 3 years, they will be our great strong blue line against Trump. So if he's not connecting the dots, man, that's on him. I was starting to feel a little like that I had let someone down, but I've kind of since turned it around and thought, I cannot help you connect the dots. I can only do so much. I mean, I'm trying, but so that's where I am. So that's where I am on that with this election.
So let me just offer this up because I was having a conversation with someone the other night, and we remember that we sort of have to think about 6th grade and 4th grade level in some of the conversations that we have because people are just not where we think they are. And so that is my big challenge is figuring out how do I talk to people in a way that makes sense. And sometimes you really have to bring it down to a different place. And maybe that's where Lindley's Storyteller Project comes in to help people sort of connect the dots. So it's not you, it's them, and it's the way that we all have to learn how to speak to
This is
people.
why it's good to have on our guests we have on today. People have been organizing for 30 years. And I think what it is, it is just meeting people where they're at. And I think what we find is when you local politics, local organizing, what people are struggling with locally is where we can maybe help them connect the dots. And what's shocking to all of us is sometimes what people don't know. And I think that I think it's hard on organizers because it gets us exhausting because we got to tell our husband where his socks are, our kids how to get whatever up the street. And then you're like, I have to tell voters these things. But when I was working in the space with the rural space last week, and I said that to an organizer, she looked at me, she's like, have you seen the movie 13th Amendment about how voting rights have been suppressed and people being kind of disengaged? It's on purpose. And this idea of uneducating people is purposeful. So I think that this is where today I'm interested to learn and the journey with people working in this space, you know, how the best way is to work with groups that maybe need that kind of connect the dot assistance. So
Yeah.
what's on your mind there?
You know,
'Cause
I thought, so, you know,
Mhm.
I do fundraising for a living as part of my job. And someone,
Right.
a mentor of mine once told me, awareness is not fundraising. So if you do a campaign or an event
Right.
and you say, well, we didn't raise any money, but we raised a lot of awareness, that it's not the same outcome. So I've been thinking
Right.
lately about the protests going on and how protests are not voting. You know, they're
Right.
coming out. It's not because they're protesting, they're building awareness, but are we building the vote? That's where organizing builds the sort of bridges the gap, maybe. So
Right.
we had some volunteers out there yesterday at May Day, educating people about Cova Coalition, educating people about how to become an activist. It's the next step.
The
Protesting,
next
great,
step.
builds awareness, but it's not increasing voting necessarily. So I think people and at these protests that are going on, I mean, they're going on like every day, every weekend, to
Yeah.
say, when you meet someone, how can you help me be an organizer? Can you help me take the next step? When you meet people at these protests, we've been doing a lot of recruiting, but if it doesn't amount to activism, we're not really, again, connecting the dots, like Fanal said. So
Right.
yeah, it's taking that next step and asking them, will you organize with me?
Yeah. And you have to be ready for that. And Fanel, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I absolutely agree. And
Yeah.
remember that people will have different responsibilities based on their capabilities and based on,
Right.
their a level of boldness. And so the protests bring you that visibility so that people can see that there's something going on. And from that something going on, they ask questions to say, why are these people out there? And so it is everything that you said, and
Amen.
the whole point about the invisible, just the people to see there's something happening, there's some movement happening, and we need that a lot too, but we need that other stuff too. We need that other piece.
I agree. And let me segue us to where we're going to talk today, because I feel like when I talked about, like this whole week, we've seen this, we've been talking about the SAVE Act, and we've been talking about leading into this kind of second feeling of the Jim Crow era of really kind of suppression, repression, just that really injustice feeling going on. And it's coming from the religious right. We see the movement there with yet the Supreme Court following that case. You know, they're going to rule if public funding could go to private or religious education, which will upend our sort of separation of church and state. It's nothing new. We've been on this slow slog to here, but why we're here in this fight a little bit while we're doing all this work is that we have to look at the dark side of this, the dark money, that's coming into our politics that are impacting things, billionaires, the outcome, and that what our guests will talk about today is how they've been shaping policy for a number of years and just upending, especially for people's lives, ability just to live a life and be free, have access to the care they need. And so today, I think we will be connecting the dots a little bit. And so I'm excited. So I want to make sure we get started. We have the time to have our guests in the room. They've been busy. We have three authors with us today. And so they've been traveling a lot. So we're so happy they'll be in the room with us. So welcome live from Network Nova. It is May 2nd, 2025, and you are on the Friday Power Lunch. And we are your hosts. You have Carrie Short here from coastal Carolina. No, Virginia Beach, teasing you. And we have Fennell Norton, our show messenger, and you have Big Mike here. And we are bringing you the guests, the issues, the action. We fuel the grassroots across Virginia and across the nation. And we like to make politics fun. And if you're new to the room, hello, welcome. Tell us where you're from. Tell us what May Day event you went to. I know I went to the DC one yesterday, and there were so many. It's sort of like, it was so great and to see friends. So let us know what you've been doing, and make sure if you use the chat, be cool in it, be nice. If you're nasty, we'll kick your butt out. No problem there. And thank you to our patrons in the room. So important that you put your money into groups like ours that really do this every day. We're volunteers, but your donation means so much to our work. So thank you very much. for that. If you and we send you special letters every week. And remember to follow us on Substack, become a supporter on there as well. Today, we're bringing you fighting for freedom on all fronts, because truly that's what we're doing. We're confronting the threats of the health of our democracy. And I am so excited to welcome and give a wave. We have journalist and author Katherine Stewart here, and her new book that's out, she has several, is Money, Lies, and God, Inside the Movement to Destroy American Democracy. Phew. I mean, that's a really big, right? This is what we're up against, folks. And then we have Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, and she's the director of the Karis Center for Religious Rights and Social Justice at the Union Theological Seminary, and she's co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign. And that's something a lot of the groups in here may be familiar with. And she has the National Call for Moral Revival. And about the book we're going to talk about, she's co-author of You Only Get What You're Organized to Take. And Noam is also joining, a co-author of that book. Noam Sandweisbach has a decade of experience supporting movements for social and economic justice. We're thrilled to have him here because he's also working on a special project with the Karis Center around to counter the power of Christian nationalism. Woo! So I'm very kind of excited. So what do you say? Are you all ready for now? We have Katherine here. Why don't we welcome Katherine up and get her settled in, and then we'll see you in a little bit.
All right, wonderful. Well, guys, I have to tell you, I am so excited to talk to Katherine Stewart today. You just heard Katherine White tell you that she is the author of Money, Lies, and God, which is her latest book, but the other one is The Power Worshippers, which came out in 2020. Katherine, welcome. I'm so happy to be with you today.
Thank you. It's really great to be here. I'm honored to join with all of you, and thanks to everybody tuning in.
Well, you know, we were chatting earlier, and I told you this is the one thing that keeps me up at night is understanding this right-wing Christian nationalist movement. But I think that everyone should know how you got started in this whole movement and dig it into the details of this. And it was sort of about the Good News Club. So will you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Thanks, Fennell. My journey into this world began 16 years ago because a Good News Club, which is an after-school club it's adult-led program of religious indoctrination. They showed up in my daughter's public elementary school in Santa Barbara, California. And this is a program of indoctrination. They install themselves in public elementary schools, confuse children who are too young to read into believing that their public school endorses this particular form of religion, and they use the kids attending the clubs to recruit their peers to the clubs. They're like, 5, 6, 7-year-old peers. They give them points and prizes, or sometimes even candy, for recruiting their peers to the club. So what I saw then really didn't make any sense. Why was this legal given the separation of church and state? Why were they forcing their way into our public elementary school when a group of parents offered them free and better space in the evangelical church next door to the school? That was the thing that really astonished me. Our school district was in the same district as an evangelical college, and a group of the moms from that college said, "Oh, well, we are evangelical too. We believe in the Great Commission, but you're just not right for the school. We'd like to offer you free space next door." At the same time, for free, and they declined. And so this was really confusing to me. I thought, what am I, evangelicalism is actually there's some diversity there too. And I thought, what do my evangelical mom friends know that I don't? I discovered they were calling our public schools their mission fields. They were calling other people's children the harvest. And as I followed that thread, I found that the topic was much bigger than I imagined. So I discovered that the Good News Club, and there were thousands of these clubs operating in public elementary schools nationwide, I discovered that it was one small part of a much larger effort to infiltrate and also undermine public education. We're seeing that war on public education really playing out today. But I discovered that the war on public education was just one small part of a much larger war on the foundations of America as a constitutional republic.
So Katherine, so in this, and you can talk a little bit about, you really you got inside, you immersed yourself inside of this movement. And I want you to talk about that because I think that people have this notion that it's there for good, but it's really not. It's really a mean organization in terms of what they think about democracies. Will you talk a little bit, help us understand this Christian nationalist movement and really what the goal is?
Sure, thank you. I mean, I have always, as an investigative journalist, believed you don't know what's really happening unless you're in the room. So over the past 16 years, I've spent a lot of time at right-wing conferences and strategy gatherings and activist gatherings. This is a movement that represents a minority of it's a leadership-driven movement, an organization-driven movement. They really spend a tremendous amount of effort on organizing. They're also incredibly well funded, and the rank and file of the movement, the voters that they're targeting with their messaging and their sort of turnout strategies represents a minority of the population, but they have disproportionate political power because they vote in disproportionate numbers. So, for instance, in the last election, 2024, the movement leaders had a sort of program where they targeted 19 swing districts in 7 swing states, and they often operated through churches. They draw the pastors in these churches into networks, give them messaging materials, tell them they got to get their people out to vote for so-called biblical values,
Mhm.
which is always like 2 or 3 like hot button culture war issues that they're pushing. It's not the biblical values as I think many, if not most American Christians understand their faith, the values of love and caring for the least of these and care for the poor and undefended and things like that. So, it's really about those culture war issues are like, you guys know what a laser pointer cat toy is, right? You
Yeah.
shine a little red light on the floor and your cat jumps at it, doesn't. So the culture war issues often function like that. They're a massive distraction. If you can get people to vote on a single issue or 2 or 3 issues, you can control their vote. So movement leaders are constantly hammering home, oh, this represents the greatest threat to our society, or that does. And they don't look at the fact that, this is a movement that's actually eroding um, life for people who are, and I would say the bottom 90%, the 90% of people who are on the sort of lower end of the economic ladder. The movement is really funded by people who represent a kind of plutocratic class, a sort of sector of the plutocratic class. Don't get me wrong. A lot of people with a lot of money in this country, but the big funders of the movement really are after economic policies that are going to benefit them. So this is a movement that claims to stand for the American family, but they're driving support for politicians whose policies are actually making it a lot harder for most American families to succeed.
So let me ask this question, and I think this one is important in terms of the role of women, what they think about that, and where they think that, quite frankly, white men ought to be ruling, which I think is sort of, when you think about a democracy, that is not where we are. And when I think about all of these things that are happening around diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, it feels like that movement is really at the core of that. Will you talk to us a little bit about that?
My gosh, there's so much to say about all of this. I mean, first of all, the anti-DEI push is just sort of a new iteration of the old, I would say, um, Jim Crow mentality, right? Unfortunately, not conscribed to the history bins. Um, it's sort of throwing everything they don't like into a bucket. It's a way that the movement taps into both examined prejudices, but also sometimes unexamined prejudices. It taps into grievance. I mean, like the movement really, and then we can talk about gender after, but I want to talk about this anti-DEI push because I call it a kind of anti-woke derangement syndrome. you know, um, this is a movement that, listen, a lot of members of the rank and file do have some legitimate grievances related to the fact that we've had this massive economic inequality over the past decades where you get this huge upward concentration of wealth at the very tippy top of the economic ladder. So a lot of members of the rank and file are feeling like, oh my gosh, it's harder for me than it was for my mom and dad. They could afford a house on a single salary. You know, when we were born, my dad was working, my mom could stay home for a few years to raise the kids, and it wasn't an economic crisis. Today, you've got two parents and you've got three jobs, and they still often can't afford a decent life for their families. But if you can, movement leaders want people to focus on scapegoats. Scapegoating is key for any authoritarian project. Think about authoritarian leaders all over the world and throughout history. They always have a scapegoat, people to blame their program, their problems on. So if they can get members of the rank and file to blame DEI for the fact that their lives are harder than they should be, well, you've totally distracted them. It's almost like that shiny laser pointer cat toy. But it also serves a larger purpose, which is that a lot of the thinkers of this movement, you know, and in my new book, Money Lies in God, I shine a bright light on a group that I call the thinkers, really do have this ideology in which they think that they should dominate a new elite. They are overwhelmingly male, overwhelmingly white, and they think that they should dominate. They think any sort of, frankly, they believe any policy that doesn't privilege white conservative men is somehow hostile to them. They've got this, you know, massive persecution complex. It's also a big key to the movement. And so, you know, this is where that sort of anti-DEI stuff comes in. And you know, they're always like going after the woke, but I actually think of this anti-DEI stuff as a new form of wokery. I mean, they're the ones banning words like pollution and status and socioeconomic and women in our federal, you know, federally funded science studies and federal agencies. They're the ones banning hundreds of books in libraries. I mean, they're the ones who are, frankly, the speech police these days. And yet, you know, these are the folks who lectured us for decades about free speech and cancel culture. And they don't want us hearing about Jackie Robinson or the Enola Gay, all this kind of nonsense, for those of you who've been following this insanity. But the
So,
other,
no,
sorry,
you go.
well, the other piece of what you asked about is women. You know, I would say gender anxiety is the rocket fuel of this movement. And there are women who are part of this movement. Some of them are simply allying what they think of as political power. Some of them don't know any different, like they've been raised in this world. This movement draws a lot of support, we can't forget, from many religious leaders, reactionary religious leaders who don't think that you know, women can't be leaders in clerical positions, but also should be submissive at home. They have a kind of theology of it. They call it, oh my gosh, Liz, I need you to hear because the term is escaping me right now. But this idea of male headship, that's it, you know, the idea that, you know, and some of them even endorse this idea that of head of household voting, which means that the so-called head of the household, which they think is naturally man, is the one who should decide how all the votes are cast in that household. And some of them, even like Doug Wilson, who Pete Hegseth, our defense secretary, has praised, think that women shouldn't be allowed to vote. So we're really seeing the Overton window shift in this area, kind of more overt expressions of male domination in all aspects of government and society.
Okay. So that's terrifying enough, but I want to get to this before my time runs out. And that is, there are two things. Jamie Raskin is one of the folks who have read this book and has said how wonderful it is. And so I'm sure that people like me and others are wondering, this group seems to be so organized, and we appear to be a bit siloed. Are people like Jamie Raskin understanding or thinking about a strategy that goes directly against fighting this kind of nationalism?
What's really interesting is that this movement coalesced outside of the bounds of the Republican Party. It really coalesced in the late 1970s, or in its contemporary form. Look, there have always been strains of you know, anti-democratic reaction in our republic throughout history, but this movement really gained force in the late 1970s, early 1980s, when a group of activists felt like the Republican Party had gone too far to the left, too soft on communism. They started to invest in the infrastructure of a movement in an effort to draw the Republican Party to the right in many respects in terms of economic policy, in terms of theology, that it was the theologians it was aligned with, and in terms of social policy. And it has really succeeded over time because of all that investment in this deep organizational infrastructure. So I am seeing a lot of, look, I think Jamie Raskin absolutely get it, but I also think that it's not necessarily up to the Democratic Party to do the organizing. It's up to the people to do the organizing. And I am
So
starting to
that
see a
so that
lot of organizing. Yeah.
yes, that's going to bring me to what you're about to say, and that is, what do we do? So what do we do?
Well, there's so much to do. I mean, the first thing to do is get out of bed. This is no time to hide under the covers. This is the time for moral courage. Um, we are really facing a crisis. I don't think I need to review what that crisis involves, but it's really important to, know that there are things we can do as individuals,
Mhm.
and there are things we can do better when we join together with others. There is, so as individuals, there's absolutely no substitute for the vote. Everybody can sort of hold people in their circles. If you're part of a faith community or a book club or anything like that, or a sporting team, you can help educate your uh, fellow, neighbors and your friends about the issues at stake in the elections, and help them, the larger issues at stake. It's not just about the front runners, it's about the judges they're going to appoint. It's about the people they're going to put in charge of agencies. It's about local policy. So get your people together, educate them, because knowledge is power, and then hold people accountable to vote. So that's really critical. And then things we can do when we join together. Number one, local activism really matters. If we step aside and think someone else is going to handle what's happening in our school districts, guess who shows up? The Moms for Liberty. So it's really important to be engaged at the local level. And then it's also really important there are a lot of pro-democracy organizations out there. Some are defending the right to vote, others are defending various sort of civil liberties things, and others are sort of progressive faith communities, others are sort of working to sort of educate others and work on voter turnout issues. So you got to sort of find your lane and then work it. And then at the end of the day, last thing I want to say is we need a big tent. We're a
Mhm.
big, noisy democracy. We're not going to agree on everything, and we're not going to get everything we want, and we probably shouldn't. It's like a family with 8 kids. Is everyone going to get everything they want? No, they're not. But if we can agree on more than we disagree on, that sort of, to paraphrase, a former president, that 80% friend, right? The person who agrees with you 80% of the time is your 80% friend, not your 20% enemy. If we can find those 80% friends, then we can work together.
Well, I think that that is a fantastic note to end on. I'm so sorry that you won't be able to stay for the after chat. Catherine, did you want to say something?
I did. You know me, and I think it's a good segue. What you said, Catherine, is finding that those people we can work with in Big Tent. And I know that our next guest is sort of working on when we talk about the countering what's going on, right? So you do have religious groups that are standing up to kind of fighting against this rise of Christofascism. I do want to say just one thing about the dark money behind this. If you have any comments about that, I know I saw something. I mean, you talk about the money, the lies, and the dark money, where that's coming from. If you want to say something about that, and then I'm just curious.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we have a significant number in our country of very wealthy people motivated by desire to advance their interests and protect their privileges. And they're typically informed by some kind of, I would say, like almost like a libertarian ideology. And we have another set of wealthy people driven by more overtly religious and cultural goals. And so when you're looking at the big funders of the movement, I mean, I'll just throw out a few names. It's by no means comprehensive. I'm thinking about the Corkerys or Barry Side or Jeff Yass or members of the Prince DeVos family juggernaut or Tim Dunn or the Wilkes brothers or Elon Musk. I mean,
Right.
religiously, these people are all over the place, right? Some are partially informed by cultural goals or religious goals. Some are not remotely informed in their own lives by religious goals, but they really are united in this idea that they need to, in order to protect their privileges and justify their vast concentrations of wealth, crush liberalism and destroy what they call the administrative state, which is the functions of an
Right.
effective working government. But a lot of people are going to be hurt if they destroy public administration
Right.
subject to ethics rules. And that's where the lies in the title of my book comes in. Conscious disinformation, conspiracism, is a huge feature of this movement. And a lot of these folks are investing in disinformation operations that separate large numbers of people from the facts. And that makes them easier to control. I mean, very simply, they understand that the truth and rational thinking is inimical to dictatorial power. The truth is their enemy.
That is so true. And we talk about that all the time. I mean, this amount of propaganda and it, inability to really communicate, getting our message out when we have so much intentionality around making people not informed and, and then using religion to kind of control people and use that power. So Katherine Stewart, we can't thank you enough. I know you're traveling. People, please buy her book. So it's great. She has a couple of them out, and visit her website too. There's so much great information there. And we wish you well. Kind of stick around in the room a little bit, please, if you can. You can turn your screen off and just hang and listen if you want to. But good luck on your travels.
Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I want to take a minute. Thanks, Catherine. Oh, that was so good. I have to say that it was so much packed in there that I can't wait to go back and actually watch the recording.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, if folks get the book, she does give a whole chapter to what you can do. And there's also a really good amount about what you can do individually. And I think it's powerful because you can feel a bit helpless. And I think our next guest will help with the helplessness, but the book also helps too.
Before we get to the next guest, I want to do a public service announcements. Okay, everybody in Virginia, we know that we have to start talking about it's May 2nd, it's vote early. We know that that's our job in the next so many weeks. It's our chance to actually talk to voters about something that can change your life. And anyways, Fennell went away. I wasn't done talking to her, but I wanted to talk about the Women's Summit real quick. Hello. So the Women's Summit is coming up. It's June 27th through 29th. How exciting is that? I want to announce that. Oh, look at you. It's like you're magic. Maybe you're possessed by something coming in and out.
It's called Laura Mack.
So anyways, I want to give a big plug because we are organizing really hard around this particular event in Virginia. It will be in Tyson's Corner, June 27th through 29th. We're lining up. I want to announce, we know Robert Hubble is one of our big speakers from the grassroots. We have a lot of Substack guests coming. Simon Rosenberg will be there. Indivisible's co-director Leah Greenberg is coming. Of course, then those are just the three I can just talk about right now. But I just want you to all, we're going to put those links in there, get your tickets, book your hotel. We have a postcard palooza Friday night. We love the postcard palooza. They'll be there 4 to 7, swapping, buying, writing, funning, talking, and we're going to really build community that night. So we're really excited. Antoine Seawright is going to be coming. We have Jennifer McClellan, our congresswoman, and Dawn Byer, another congresswoman. Unfortunately, Jerry Conley, our congressman here, who is going to kick things off, is seriously sick. His cancer has come back. But we have a great program. We hope you'll join us. And I just want to do that station break. But now,
Yeah,
Karen.
I just wanted to say also to everything that you just said, yes, and Elizabeth Chur is also coming, The Joy of Talking Politics to Strangers. And she's
Right.
excellent and wonderful. And I think that anybody who feels like they can't talk about politics, she makes you feel so good and capable. And so I'm really excited that she's going to be joining us too.
Feel like there's a lot of people coming that, that we are forgetting about, because I was like, oh yeah, Elizabeth is coming. And we've been talking to several people, maybe Jess Piper, we're waiting for that. And just in general, it's going to be fantastic to be in the room with everybody. And Carrie's going to be there doing some stuff on organizing.
Yep, I got a workshop, and I just thought
You
all
do?
of the wonderful networking that goes on in between the sessions and in the small group workshops.
Yeah.
There's a ton. It's so great to meet a lot of the people who are on the Friday Power Lunch from all over the country in person, and see them there. And I will just like sitting on the bench with Susan LaBandabar from Swing Blue Alliance is like still one of my best memories of my women's summits in the past, because it's just so cool to like reach out and meet someone IRL and sit down and strategize with them. This is what I'm dealing with in my community. Do you have any ideas? It's just that part is sort of the unsung part of it all. And then of course the workshops. I'm excited. I'm going to be doing a workshop on, running these grassroots organizations and how to determine what's a quality call to action for your group, how to curate things, how to pick stuff and how to run it. It's a real nuts and bolts kind of thing. So
nuts and bolts. I love that. And I forgot Swing Blue Alliance. Susan LaBandabar is doing a workshop as well. She will be there. Markers for Democracy. We have just so many great people going to be on the ground joining us. So that will be really exciting. Red, Wine, and Blue is a big sponsor. They're going to be doing a lot with us, and that will be very cool. Reed McClellan, who is for Progressive Turnout, is a sponsor. I saw him on a call the other day. I'm so excited he's coming. Just to hang out with Reed will be cool. So let's get.
And I have,
yes,
yeah, 1 second though. I have one pitch, and I may have already said it this year. I know I said it last year, but for those of you who are in groups, would you please consider raising money for a scholarship for a member to attend the summit? I think that would be a really good effort. We're talking about helping each other right now. And I would really love to see Cova Coalition be able to send someone who otherwise couldn't afford it. And I think it would be a great thing for your group to raise money for a scholarship for one of your members.
Yeah, because you can buy a ticket, give a ticket, and we have sponsors that do that. So thank you, Carrie, for that reminder. Fennell, you're off the hook. Go, me and Carrie, we're up next, and I'm so excited. Team in the room, when we talk about what we've been facing, what we see with a lot of this stuff coming at us has a lot to do with our policy around even our anti-poverty movement. And we see this kind of dark and light struggle with wanting to help people. And then we have all these cuts, and we have, I'm so excited to talk to our two guests about this kind of eternal struggle, this moral struggle in this country to close the income equality gap. And we haven't done it because
It's just gotten worse, and it's
are
just
in the
gotten
wrong
worse.
spot. So welcome in the room, Reverend. I want to make sure we get to Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris is the theologian, pastor, and author, an anti-poverty organizer who has spent more than 30 years organizing side by side with the poor and the low-income community. And let's put right beside you your friend and your co-author, your organizer, Noam Sandweisbach. And you just have a lot of experience over the years too, organizing in this space. And I hope we can also talk about your work in this the countering the rise of Christian nationalism as well. So let's get started. You also have been on the road with your book. Just let's talk about how, just in general, how are you feeling energized for this movement of your book and getting it out there? And the book is, right? You only get what you are organized to take.
That's right. So thanks so much. It's awesome to be with you all, and what a powerful group of people in Virginia and across the country you assemble every week. Thank you for having us. So indeed, it's really actually invigorating to be out on the road. We spend a lot of time as organizers traveling anyways, but to have this book in hand has lessons, which have stories of people organizing for change and winning. And to then be able to be, last week we were in Ithaca, New York, Binghamton, New York, Elmira, New York, Rochester, New York, Buffalo, New York, and Albany, New York. We were doing New York, all in like 3 or 4 days, getting to meet with grassroots organizations, folks that have been mobilizing around hands off and other, things in this moment, congregations, people of kind of all walks of life. We got to hang out on campuses, we got to be on picket lines. I mean, there's a lot of motion happening in the country right now. And there has to be. And our question is, how do you move that motion into an organized force to win all of the demands that we have, to push back against these most regressive policies that are happening, and to actually hold out the light that something else is possible, and that the vast, vast, vast majority of people in this country do not like the way things are going and want to be able to change them. And that's where organizing comes in, because it gives people the tools to kind of take what they need and to organize their communities to win justice. And so it's amazing. It's great. It's invigorating. And it's not that people are not very deeply concerned. I mean, I remember being at Ithaca College, with a bunch of students who had all written down before we were there a bunch of the concerns, and they're everything, you know, they're around immigration and ICE raids, they're around student loans and debt, they're around just being able to have food and not be forced to live in their cars. I mean, you know, it's a whole host of things. It's the attacks on DEI and what they're able to learn, you know, and the kind of criminalization of protest that's happening in this country. All of the concerns are there, but it's not depressing, because people are standing up, because people are trying to learn more, and because people want to, as we say, organize, organize, organize.
Well, that's a good segue to Noam, because I see shaking his head. Noam, your background in organizing, tell us a little bit. You're the co-author, how you guys used your voice in this book. And I'll have to say, it was really sweet when you talked about your start of organizing the van on a trip. And I'm thinking you're probably in your sweet spot traveling around, and remember those days as an early organizer. Noam, how did you get involved in this work? And then how did you connect with Liz? Tell us a little bit about your journey on this.
Oh, it's so good to be with you all. Can you all hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, good. Well, I've been doing grassroots anti-poverty organizing for about a decade now, um, and met up with Reverend Liz and this crew of organizers that we work with just a week before we launched the Poor People's Campaign back in 2017. And then since then, we've just been traveling kind of nonstop all over the country. So definitely traveling is our modus operandi. We're comfortable on the road. Um, and over those years, you know, we've just met really with a broad cross-section of society, I think, as Liz was saying, who actually hold so much more in common than we are told to believe. You know, we live, I think, in a political moment that is, the rhetoric is defined by division and by scapegoating, I think, as Katherine so aptly put it. And yet we see in polling data that, like, the reality is the majority of Americans actually agree on so many things. And what we see when we're actually out in communities is that's reflected back to us. And I do think actually that folks are really seeing really clearly in this moment the connections between what often seem like siloed issues. And so
Right.
one thing that we've been doing for years in our organizing is really connecting the dots between, for instance, this attack on democracy with what actually does living in a substantive, we call substantive democracy, mean? Connecting the issue of voting rights with the attack on healthcare. You know, connecting the attack on democratic institutions with the attack on housing. And under the Trump administration, you know, the extreme criminalization of homelessness. You know, and really seeing that this is a fight, that a fight for democracy is a fight for healthcare, for housing, for environmental justice, for women's rights, for reproductive justice, and the like. So, you know, I've just had the privilege of being mentored by Reverend Liz for near on 8 years. And the book that we've written, which you can see behind Reverend Liz, You Only Get What You Organize to Take, draws on about 30 years of lessons from the movement to end poverty. You know, lessons from organizers who are really organizing from the bottom up. And really living into this lesson of you only get what you're organized to take. You know, another way of putting that slogan we often say is things given to us, things conceded to us can just as easily be taken away unless we actually have a power to hold on to those victories and expand on those victories. And actually, I think the stories and lessons in this book help us understand what it would mean to really build the kind of power to not just win a few things in the short term, but actually build a long-term movement for the kind of democracy we all need and deserve.
So, Reverend Liz, I had a question for you. So this idea of faith-based motivation for social justice has come up just within us in the leadership and our team at Network Nova and the Friday Power Lunch. It comes up a lot. In fact, last week we spoke to some folks who were talking about their motivation to donate and to create a philanthropic endeavor was out of their faith life. I'm wondering, you know, we're all really faithful people, spiritual people. And it's a tough time right now to be a Christian in this environment. And it's a tough time to say that you're motivated by your faith to fight for social justice. How are you handling that? How are you handling the judgment that's coming down on the well-meaning Christians right now?
Well, I mean, what we're seeing right now, I mean, there's article after article. I mean, with this like Christian, anti-Christian bias task force, and, is actually the people of faith that you're talking about, the people of faith that are here on this call and that help organize this awesome, gathering. Like it's actually an attack on our faith, like our faith that it doesn't have to be this way, our faith that this is not as good as it gets, our faith in justice and truth and love, right? And
Mhm.
and in fact, you know, this is, I think, a really important time to not concede our faith traditions, our religious institutions, our theologies to a small group of very powerful extremists who are completely distorting, warping, um, and really attacking the faith traditions that they claim to represent. There are 2,000 Bible passages across the Hebrew scriptures and the Christian Testament that talk about justice and love and mercy. Um, uh, you know, Jesus's inaugural, as a Christian, Jesus's inaugural sermon, right? His like hitting hitting the road is talking about, I've been anointed to bring good news, right? To those that have been, made poor by structures and systems and oppressive decrees and executive orders, right? I mean, he literally is talking in those terms.
Yes,
Uh,
but of course we've got folks like on this call, not to interrupt, but we have folks on this call who they were taught not to talk about religion or politics. Now you can't even tell the difference with some of these folks. And so I don't think that first of all, I have this fear, and I know this happens with my other spiritual friends, that they have a fear that if they even open the door to talk about religion within politics, that they're just going to somehow be overwhelmed. They don't know enough. I don't know the 2,000 Bible verses. I don't know what it says in the Quran. So how can I be the one to bring this up when I don't know enough? So what do you do to help your organizers have the strength to just stick their neck out and say that I know what's right and this is not right?
well, that's exactly it. I mean, it's about right and wrong. And I think we actually know that. Our
Right.
deepest, sometimes they're religious, sometimes they're constitutional, but our deepest moral values, tell us about what's right and wrong. It's wrong to cut people off of healthcare. I mean, it's wrong to treat your neighbor in a hateful way. It's wrong to say that kids who are in Head Start programs, shouldn't have Head Start anymore. And I think the basic kind of instincts, and the basic kind of decency of people in this country, actually can tell the difference between right and wrong. If we look at policies right now, right? Um, the vast majority of people agree with progressive policies, including the vast majority of people of faith, right? And this is something that we don't, this gets drowned out. We don't hear this because there is this equal sign between kind of extremism and hate, and politics and Christianity in this moment. But actually, sociologists tell us that the vast majority, like in sheer numbers and in percentage, people of faith are kind of liberal or progressive. But they're doing that in an individualized way because, as you said, we have been taught for so long that the separation of church and state, the separation of religion and politics, um, means that we shouldn't bring either our
Right.
our faith views or our political views, and impose them on others. And we have to say that we need this to be true, right? It warps my faith to impose it on someone else. It's actually opposite. And we cannot concede the kind of the terrain of morality, of what is right and wrong. And we, as progressive liberal people, have to also see that organizing and doing collective action, not necessarily as a religious body, but as people who see the difference between right and wrong, matters. And so we have extremists on one hand who are small in their numbers, but big in their power and their organization. And we have many the rest of us who are big in our numbers, but not as organized, not as collective in the way that we're kind of putting those policies, those positions out there.
Yes. Going back to that, I think people in the room may be interested to learn about the center, the Keros Center, and what you do there, because I love that you talked about it's a Greek word, refers to the right, critical, or opportune moment. And I feel like that would be really great for one of you to take that on. And the other side of it is that people see this in a larger context, that you talk about the 30 years going back to Ralph Reed, that this war on the poor or the working class, it's not a new thing. We haven't solved it. Politically, Democrats haven't also been good on that side of things. So talk about a little bit about your founding, and then also, this long history. How did we get here? And are we shocked that we're still kind of fighting the same problems? Who wants to take? Yeah, go
Liz, I
ahead.
wonder if you want to talk about the founding, since you founded, and I could take on that second
Yeah,
question.
that sounds
Yeah,
great.
so kairos is, as you said, a Greek word. And it's a notion of time. There's chronological time, chronos, right? But then there's kairos time. And kairos is about the kind of crumbling of old institutions, and new opportunities and movements for justice breaking through. Doesn't it sound like the moment we're in, right? Where people are losing faith in the institutions around us, and yearning for something else. Now, the thing about kairos is that what shows up through it doesn't necessarily better, right? And I think that we're seeing this right now. And what matters is actually what we do in a time like this, because it's a moment of opportunity. So we founded the Kairos Center about 20 years ago, trying to look at especially this question of the intersection between religion and kind of justice. And what do our faith traditions and say about what kind of world we should be living in? We're not a particularly religious organization. There are people from all walks of life and all faiths, and people not of faith. But what we're dedicated to doing is building a movement to address injustice, led by those that are most impacted, involving everyone, with people of faith as moral standard bearers, right? This kind of right and wrong, holding out of that. And the work that we're trying to do is to kind of make a question to this moment of, how did we get here also as a nation? Some of what Katherine was saying before. I mean, there's a long history in this country that goes back to the founding of it, where this kind of battle of theology has been being battled out, right? I mean, whether it's the doctrine of discovery and indigenous people kind of losing their right to their own religion and worship and spirituality, whether it's U.S. chattel slavery, and slaveholders, weaponizing the Bible.
Right.
But you had someone like Harriet Moses Tubman and abolitionists who didn't concede religion. In the line of that, it comes this moment that we're living in, which is after Jim Crow, when a bunch of the Christian churches wanted to
Right.
not allow for the desegregation of Christian schools. They had to turn somewhere, and where did they turn? They turned to kind of an anti-abortion and anti-choice fight. And then you have neoliberalism and economic changes come into play, and it gets us to this place that we're in right now.
Yeah.
thinking
Let me
about.
pass that, before we run out of time, let me pass that to Noam, because I know you have to leave at 1, so I want to be respectful of your time, and I want to make sure we get to the other side, but that dissertation was just too good, by the way. Noam, why don't you pick it up from that, and then we'll go ahead and give you guys a break so you can get ready for your next tour. Noam.
Sure. Yeah, I think I wanted to maybe give just an example, a story from our book that maybe helps to illustrate this over 30-year march to where we've gotten today, and also maybe where we need to go in terms of our organizing. There's an organization out in rural Washington state, right on the ocean, and the county is called Grays Harbor, Washington. It's a poor, mostly white county in Washington, and in the early 20th century, it was the timber export capital of the world. So just enormous amounts of wealth coming in and out of that county. It was deindustrialized in the 70s, and really no industry came in to replace the timber industry. The only economic investment that actually came into that county over the last 30 years was expanding prisons and detention centers. So the economic activity around that. This is a historically Democratic voting county, and the first time in over 100 years that it voted red was in 2016 for Donald Trump. It's now voted red 2 cycles counting. In one of those towns, 14,000 people live, and over 1,000 of those people are unhoused. Live in encampments along the rivers. So this is a heavily dispossessed town of primarily white folks, though not only. And in that town, some leaders that we've worked with for years started an organization called Chaplains on the Harbor. This was a group of chaplains who started to do what they call street ministry, which was, actually going out and organizing amongst unhoused people who lived along those rivers. They started doing prison ministry, so actually going to those expanded prisons and working with and actually counter recruiting folks from white power gangs and other white nationalist and Christian nationalist gangs. And what they found in Grays Harbor is that as government was disinvested from that, as industry and government was disinvested from that area, the only institutional power that came in to fill the gap was Christian nationalist aligned institutions. It was churches, it was schools. The only services on offer for these, thousands of dispossessed people were food banks and ministries connected to these hyper, religiously regressive churches and networks of what they call parachurch organizations. So the organizations attached to churches. And so what Chaplains on the Harbor found was that even just the small presence of a dedicated core of progressive Christian leaders in what was previously a vacuum of progressive religious activity made all the difference in the world. And so I think this speaks exactly to what Reverend Liz was saying, which is, we can't concede this moral ground to the religious right, and we also can't concede the material ground, the geographic ground, which is to say we actually need to contest for not just the hearts and minds of people, but we need to be able to meet folks' actual material needs, because the Christian right has gotten so adept at meeting folks where they're at, I think as Katherine was saying, and then pulling them into a political movement. And so we need to be able to offer something compelling for folks as well. And as they have found in Chaplains on the Harbor, folks at the bottom of society they're willing to move in the direction of where answers are being provided to them. If they're, and so people are so much more winnable than I think often political pundits and pollsters like to tell us.
Well, Noam, you made me think of what has done when we saw in some other countries, and where with when 9/11, the terrorist attacks there and all that, how they were able to, in the madrasas, radicalize people, these places that are impoverished, they come in with a radical view of Islam, and this is what they provide, everything that people need, and this is what we see. And it's not a new idea, right, to kind of take advantage there. So that's what just came into my mind when I saw that other kind of radicalization and then what it can produce. So I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time. I know we're on the hour. For those in the room that know that we go to 1, I always will never let something, if we really need to learn and we need to make sure that we finish out with these great guests, because we're going to they're not going to be able to come to the after chat. Last question. How is Reverend William Barber doing? We saw him get arrested praying in the Capitol, and I haven't heard how his health is. Let's ask about him and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, so he was arrested praying right in that rotunda. But he was released later and he's doing great. And I think it's sparking a conversation about exactly what we've been talking about here. So
Yes.
we wish him
Yeah,
well.
I saw that. It was sort of like the Christian Nationalists, Mike Johnson, and we saw this praying going on, and we saw just a crackdown. It was really kind of obviously just striking to see that. So we wish you well. For the folks, there's this book. Get this book. I have not finished it. I've started to listen to it where I could, and I just find it so charming how you started out and talking about your early days as a college student and getting those seat vans in. I just felt like your voices, everything you've learned along the way, it is super, super important. So thank you so much for being here. And you only get what you organize for. Damn, that's a great title. Wish you well. Wish you well, guys. Noam, Liz. Oh my gosh, what a great segment. Fennell, since
We
you've
could have
been
talked about that forever. I could have talked about that forever.
well, we could have, right?
So fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that book is going to be interesting to read some parts of it about, or we didn't really get into the nuts and bolts of folks organizing themselves. That's what they're doing to get what they want. And was such a great lesson there,
Right. You got to work. Yeah, absolutely. The poverty movement of the poor folks organizing themselves. That's irreplaceable.
Yeah, but I also think it was a pretty interesting segment in there about going where people are. And I love this Gray's place that I'm going to look it up because I want to read about it in Washington. And I just think we've had 3 incredible books, and what we know is knowledge is power, and we have to think about different ways about how we do this. And Carrie, I think it goes to your question that you asked in the beginning about what should we do, what can we do, and how do we talk about it, and how do we connect the dots. And so I think Money Lies in God and The Power Worshipers, and now this book, which I will order, I think this is some of the antidotes that we need, some of the lessons that we need to learn.
Right. We have the power to reframe this from a war on the poor back to a war on poverty, which is something that is interdenominational.
And that while they're giving themselves trillions of tax breaks and robbing everybody at the bottom, and cruelty of taking not just some, but all this healthcare away and different things, so it's a true reminder. And it also reminds me is that when we wondered why Trump got elected, it's because he spoke to people like the Reverend was saying, and Noam was saying, they have needs, and Trump was really speaking to those needs, even though they were false. They were false promises. I'll bring you this. I'll bring you a job. He promised jobs in my hometown in Youngstown, Ohio. He promised all this kind of stuff, right? So,
But of course, they've convinced themselves that all politicians lie. So in their mind, they've just chosen Trump's lies over another politician's lies.
Then you can't find the truth. My neighbor said that to me, that this religious neighbor said to me, well, all politicians lie. Then you can't really find the truth. So it's really kind of magic stuff going on there. But I want to make sure, I love that Georgia has her hand up already. For those of you in the room and our patrons especially, thank you. Thank you so much. It really means so much. I would love to see us have more patrons. Because one, I think we work on this every week. We're bringing all this stuff to calls to action, and it really helps us continue our work. If you like what you've seen, give us a little bit in our cup. Thank you very much. And next week, May 9th, we're heading into Mother's Day next week, so you better pay attention if you want to send something. We have Sam Shirazi coming in. He has a new Substack, Federal Fallout. If you know Sam, it's all about politics. He's a Virginia guy, but he knows all about talking anything politics. Sam Shirazi will be here. And then we also have Holiday Adair Blue Voter Guide. Ooh, we're getting into voting time. And lastly, Andrea Miller of National Women's Political Caucus will be here with her sort of tricks and tools that she'll be using and talking about this election. And she's super excited to be here. So I want to make sure that Women's Summit stuff, get your ticket, anything else, because we're going to wrap up and go to the other side. Hold on for horses. We're ready to go. So Dennis, why don't we roll out a little troubled times? See you on the side.